Okay, thank you so much for your patience. This is Andy Pedraza with Special Effects Academy on the start of the week session for April 22nd, 2018. We'll take a quick look at the statistics for the week that ended, the market movements, as well as taking a look at what the daily charts are telling us for the week to come. So on that note, I will get started. Our usual agenda will remain the same, I should say. We'll take a look at the currency strength meter, the fundamental announcements for the week to come. I'll look at the charts for the major pairs. Any insight on setups that are possibly in progress, and a little bit of parting words there at the end on, I always like to end with a little bit of, I guess, recommendation or what I consider words of wisdom, excuse my hubris there, as to what you should do to make your trading always slightly better than it was the week before. So let's jump in with the currency strength meter without further ado. As usual, we will be looking at the week that just ended. That is the chart on the extreme right hand side of the slide. This is the week that ended on April 20th, and the week immediately prior to that one, the week that ended on April 13th. So looking at last week, we can see that there was a lot of shifting around in the actual charts. Starting with the Aussie had been coming off of a couple of weeks of very good recovery. It did suffer a setback, and again, this is somewhat normal. Price never moves in just one direction. We will have these retracements happening here and there. These become significant if you're trading very short term, which is what we're trying to do in the Forex trading room, is get in and out of trades within that same week if at all possible. For longer term trades, which we also do, and we signal some of these now and then, we say, okay, this is going to be a long-term trade and we're going to do this and that. They tend not to be as significant. We can weather through a momentary reversal so long as the overall long-term trend and direction maintain themselves. So this was definitely a less than stellar week for the Aussie. It did end up depreciating against the dollar, the JPY, and the euro. And I am in long-term trades with both USD and JPY against the Aussie. So those trades did not fare very well on my long-term account. But again, that is long-term, and they're still moving in the direction that I would like them to move. So leaving those alone. The Canadian was coming off 3 consecutive weeks of gain against most of the other currencies. It had an unfortunate, I wouldn't say unfortunate, I guess it had a fundamental that did not really align with what the market wanted to hear. So it ended up giving back some of those gains against all but the New Zealand and the pound. So we see that the only ones the Canadian gained on were the Kiwi and the pound for the week. Everything else went into the negative for the loonie, is what we call the Canadian dollar in general in our trading. Moving on to the Swiss franc, a mixed week. It gained strength on the Canadian, New Zealand, and pound, and lost territory against the Aussie, euro, JPY, and dollar, especially the USD Swiss, which we'll see when we get to those to that chart later on, was a significant reversal in fortune for the Swiss. The euro, in turn, depreciated against the dollar and the JPY and gained strength against most of the other currencies, particularly against the pound. This was a very bad week for the euro pound. I did get out of a short trade at profit that we had been carrying for a couple of weeks, maybe more. So we took a little bit of profit on that one and got out as it made the huge reversal. The pound in general was the loser for the week, and this was as a result of, I am going to say unfortunate in this case, an unfortunate fundamental announcement having to do with the consumer price inflation year over year. It definitely wasn't what the market wanted to hear, and the market took it out on the pound. It depreciated against every single major currency out there, as well as gold and silver. So the pound was the overall loser for the week. The JPY depreciated against the dollar alone. So, and I noted this throughout the week that the USDJPY was going counter to the rest of the market. As regards the rest of the currencies, the JPY did appreciate against all of them. The Kiwi depreciated against everybody except, as mentioned before, the pound, which was the overall loser for the week. The dollar was one of the major winners for the week, gaining on every other currency. So the dollar is the clear winner. And we're not going to look at gold and silver other than to, I do use them as bellwethers. So silver gained against everybody else, and gold gained against pretty much everybody except silver, dollar, and JPY. But we're not going to be looking at any charts that have anything to do with bullion metals. I just keep them as a sometimes very useful point of reference. Okay, moving on. We'll take a look at the fundamental announcements, the calendar for the week. It is a very light week as these goes. It'll fit inside one screen. So you're seeing every single fundamental announcement with a high impact that is scheduled. We start Monday evening or Monday night with the Royal Bank of Australia giving out their consumer price index results quarter over quarter. Not expected to have any significant impact. We move on to Thursday, so we have nothing going on Tuesday or Wednesday. We skip directly to Thursday, where we have the interest rate decision out of the European community. It is not expected to change. Of course, if it does change, it would be a major upset in either direction. If it increases or decreases, it would massively shift the euro, but no one expects the ECB to make any changes this time around. They will have both the interest rate and the deposit rate decision happening at the same time, 7:45 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Followed about 45 minutes later by a monetary policy statement and press conference. The ECB uses these, as all the other major banks do, simply to tell the public what their guidance and policies are going to be for the next period of time till the next press conference comes along. These do have the potential to move the market significantly if they release any guidance that the market did not expect. So everybody's going to be paying close attention to whether the comments are hawkish or dovish for the euro, and you may see some fluctuations. I will not be trading this one live. There really isn't a whole lot to be done with these other than to look for the movements. You get as much bang for your buck if you are up at the time. It's going to be 8:30 a.m. U.S. Eastern Daylight Time. If you see it rising, if you see the euro dollar rising, for example, buy it. If you see it dropping, sell it. The moves will tend to be very short-lived. Sometimes they will reverse within a matter of hours. Other times they simply establish a new level and then start trading sideways from there. Again, I would not expect any significant movement, which is why I'm not going to bother getting up that early. That is the middle of the night for me. I tend to go to bed around 5 a.m. my time and get up somewhere around 11. So 8:30 is the middle of my my sleep pattern. Sorry. Moving on, that same Thursday we have the consumer price index out of Tokyo for their fresh food. It is a very significant metric within Japan, as they rely a lot on their fish markets and vegetable markets. That's a country that is definitely in into fresh food. So that CPI is important to the yen, but not drastically so. It should not be making any major moves. However, at 10 p.m. U.S. time, we do have the interest rate decision out of the Bank of Japan. That could be massive. I don't think there are any forecasts or expectations. My personal belief is that there will be no change. The Japanese are very conservative when it comes to these things. So they tend not to rock the boat unless they want to make a change for some reason. But they're also very unpredictable. So the odd time that they do make a change, there is no advance warning. It simply happens. Last time was about, I'm going to say about 2 years ago, when they dropped the rate from 0 to negative 0.1%. And that sent shockwaves through all the JPY pairs. That was, I'm going to say 2 years ago. I'd have to go back and check at least 2 years since that happened. So there's a significant amount of time in between changes. 2 years is a big amount of time for these things. So they may do something, may not. No way to predict. I will be up trading this one. If anybody's interested, let me know, and I'll be happy to open up a room. But like I said, only once every 2 or so years is there anything good out of one of these announcements. So might be the better part of, well, better use of your time not to bother. This is in the middle of my usual trading hours, so I'll definitely be there. Then they have the monetary policy statement happening at the same time as the interest rate decision. And 2 hours later, they will have a press conference where Kuroda-san, the president of or governor of the Bank of Japan, will tell people what his guidance is going to be for the next period. Last but not least, that same, now we're into Friday since that was at midnight. On Friday morning, we have the GDP quarter over quarter coming out of the UK, which is a high fundamental, but I will likely not be trading that one. Again, it falls within my my sleep patterns there. And at 8:30 a.m., the GDP annualized out of the United States, as well as the core personal consumption quarter over quarter. These two are not expected to move the market significantly in either direction. So if there is one there that I might actually trade with a little bit of hope, there would be the Japanese ones, as well as the perhaps the interest rate decision out of the ECB, with more emphasis giving to the Japanese ones. I really don't expect the European community to do anything different than what they've been doing. The Japanese, however, are always good for a nice surprise every now and then. So that is the calendar for the week. Again, if you ever need to check the calendar, or you want to look at the low and medium impact announcements, of which there are dozens, you can go to this link, specialeffectsacademy.com/fundamental-announcements, or you can just go to the main page and you will find the calendar on the sidebar to the right as one of the options. And with that, we're going to move on to the actual pairs. We can see the euro dollar on the screen right now on the daily. It has done a retreat back to a the outer trend line, I should say, that it has been following for more than a year now. Breached it and is now slowly making its way back towards the top. So these are the normal reversals. All in all, on the daily, we can see that trading has been sideways since the beginning of the year. Gone up, gone down, but in general, maintained that same level. Its price is currently within the support resistance areas of the chart. It could go either way. I am definitely not bullish on the dollar, so I tend to trade the euro dollar towards the top whenever I enter trades. So I will be looking for opportunities to trade it back to the 125 area. cautiously and taking as many pips as I can on its way up. Right now, of course, we're just reviewing for what might be entries later on in the week, but my bias for euro dollar is still bullish. And as you can see, that is what this chart is telling us, is that it is heading up. It would need to drop significantly before I shift my views and say that we've entered into a bearish pattern for the euro dollar. Moving on to the pound dollar. We have pretty much my same guidance, and you can see this in the daily chart. It's definitely going up. That's the only direction it has and has had for more than a year now as well. It is trading at a significantly lower level than it had attained even a week ago. A week ago, it was right here at the top, and I had high hopes that it was about to make that breakout towards the 150, which is my target. The fundamental announcement, as I mentioned, the unfortunate fundamental announcement, made it drop all the way back to the prior levels of support, and it is now trading right below the inner trend line. It still has a ways to go to hit the outer. I don't think it will go that far down, but it does need to recover from that announcement. I will also be looking to trade this one back up in the week or weeks to come, but of course we'll wait for the right entries out of the charts. So bullish on this chart as well. Moving on to the USDJPY, and we had mentioned that the USDJPY seems to be trading counter to the other JPY pairs in general. So we see that the JPY has weakened against the dollar. It has retreated from the bottom that it made about a little bit more than a month ago. It made this bottom. This is a pair that I heavily trade. I favor the USDJPY quite a lot, especially for longer term trades. It is in a channel, a very slowly dropping channel. As you can see, it's made several round trips just in the visible area of the chart. That continues into the past. This is a very long running channel. It seems now to be making a break towards the top. However, I am not too convinced that that can sustain itself. So I would more likely be looking for a break towards the bottom as the JPY recovers against the dollar. And that may happen with the announcement that is coming out Thursday night into Friday morning. So that will be very late into the week. If I see a good entry in either direction, of course, I will take it. But I'm not too convinced about this chart maintaining its current drive towards the top. Rather, I think that at some point that will break and it will head back towards the bottom of the channel. My long-term target for the USDJPY remains the same, and even 100. It is currently almost 800 pips higher than that level. And the 100 is actually off the visible area of the chart. It would be somewhere down towards the bottom. And that's about all I can say about this pair. I'm more likely to trade it down than to trade it up. But ultimately, if I get a good signal in either direction, I will take it. USD Canadian. USD Canadian has had a very interesting year. It's gone in both directions. Right now, after the announcement last week on their interest rate being unchanged, it gave up about almost half of the gains it had made since the last high that it made back in March. It strengthened against the dollar significantly by about, I'm going to say about 500 to 600 pips is the distance, and it's already retraced 200 and some. I do not believe in Canadian sustained weakness. Rather, this is a chart that I've always believed should be headed more towards the bottom. However, the Canadian is very dependent on certain commodities like oil and minerals, and that market has been hammered so far this year, and that's been the cause of some of the upsets we see since I'm going to say since the beginning of the year. This bottom here, when it touched the trend line, is the start of the year. And since then, the Canadian has been steadily weakening against the dollar before a recent reversal that now seems to have ended and is heading back up. I'll trade this one in either direction. I really don't have a long-term target for it. It's just a pair that if you can catch one of these trend line breaks or trend line runs, either one, you will probably have good opportunities. In this case, it is weakening. We'll see what it does for the remainder of the week. I'm going to be looking at the daily chart for the USDCAD constantly to see if I get any entry indicators out of the daily, looking for more of a long-term trade. The short-term trades tend to go in either direction with this pair because it is not consistent. It just moves too easily in either direction at the drop of a hat. However, a long-term trade, as you can see, will provide opportunities for a high number of pips to be taken. Moving on to Aussie dollar, and I'm not going to dwell on the Aussie dollar chart for too long. You've all heard me say this for weeks now. I do expect the Aussie currency, the Australian dollar, to recover against all the other currencies out there. It has been in a slump since the beginning of the year, which is this top that you see, the most recent top touching that trend line up here. It's gone into free fall. It's tried to stage recovery several times along the way. None of them have been particularly long-lived. The latest attempt was in the last 2 or 3 weeks or so, and last week saw a reversal back to the trend line. It is still trading higher than it was before. I still expect it to head towards the top, but again, this is a long-term trade. If I see any trades in the short term, of course, we will take them, but I'm not going to spend too much time analyzing the Aussie dollar at this point. Kiwi dollar is a similar situation. It has been trading sideways for the bulk of the year, traveling between 0.7450, close enough, and 0.72. So it's got about a 250 pip band that it has been traveling, indicated by these two levels of support resistance, where you can see that the bottom level is the one most visited, and it is where price action is right now. If it does manage to pierce this, it would have a nice little bit of free fall all the way down to the 0.68 or thereabouts. That would be a good trade to get into. I do not see, however, both of these currencies cooperating and having the USD strengthen that much as the Kiwi weakens by the same amount to drive it towards the bottom. Likely it will continue traveling in between these two bands. If we see opportunities to trade that channel bounce on the daily, we will. Right now, if anything, it is still hugging the bottom on all the indicators, as well as what we can see in the visual elements of the chart. So enough about that one. Moving on to the USD Swiss. As I mentioned before, when we were looking at the relative strength meter for these different currencies, the Swiss has been in a bit of a free fall against the dollar since the beginning of February. So we're going on 2.5, close to 3 months of sustained Swiss weakness. It is now at the very top of a prior channel. Could it go higher? Yes, of course, it can do whatever it wants, but more likely, as with the Aussie dollar or with the Aussie currency in general, this cannot be sustained. It's weakened about as much as it is possible for it to weaken. It still has about 250 pips to the top at the one at parity level. I don't see it going up there unless something dramatic happens. Likely it will bounce off this level of resistance and start traveling back towards the bottom of that channel, the next channel, or the very next channel. So I'll be looking for a break in direction for the Swiss to regain some of that strength and try to trade for as many pips as I can towards the bottom. If it does, however, break out of this trend line, I would consider trading it somewhere towards the top of the range for those 250 pips or however many I can capture. But I'd have to be very convinced that it is going to make that strong of a move. Moving on to Aussie Canadian. Again, not going to dwell on these. The Canadian has been strengthening against the Aussie, probably the only one it's been strengthening against for the past week. I do expect an Aussie recovery. This is another pair that I would happily trade back towards the top when it gives me a good signal. Otherwise, I'm going to be leaving it alone. Euro Swiss. Our next pair, we've taken a lot of profit from the Euro Swiss in the past couple of weeks. In fact, it probably saved last week for me as I took another nice bit of a change off of it. I had doubled and even tripled down on some of the trades we were taking with the Euro Swiss as it continued to rise. Finally, towards the end of the week, it did run out of steam. And we'll be looking at this pair very closely as the week begins to see if it's going to continue, or if it's looking like it's trying to reverse back to one of the prior levels of support, whichever the one that may be. I'm happy to trade it in either direction as soon as it gives me a nice signal. Euro Pound. I mentioned the Euro Pound early on in the discussion. I did trade it for a good number. Actually, you can see one of the trades here. I traded it down significantly for a few weeks, and it finally took me out at a revised stop. So I had some profit off of this one and has now done a reversal all the way back to a prior high and quickly dropped again, and it is trading right below that high. I am still firmly believing that the pound has more strength, so it should continue dropping. But of course, I'm not going to trade it in that direction until I see a good entry signal for a short on this Euro Pound. If it continues heading higher, I'm just going to wait it out. I don't think it will go that much higher, but I don't care where it goes. However high it goes, I'm going to be waiting for an opportunity to trade it back towards the bottom. My bias in this pair obviously is bearish. I believe it still has more room to go towards the floor. Moving on to the EURJPY. Not a whole lot to see here. The JPY has been weakening against the euro since the middle of March, and it has been following a trend line that it established pretty quickly. It has tested that trend line a few times, is currently right underneath it. Could go either way. It's in one of those no man's land areas of the daily chart where there really is no clear indicator of what it's going to do. So in these cases, we wait for the charts to tell us, for now, ignoring it. Euro Canadian. Euro Canadian has been traveling an upward channel for quite a while, since August of last year. We can see that channel. It's broken out both towards the bottom and towards the top a few times along the way, always returning to the channel. Currently bounced off the bottom at support and is trying to make its way back up. This might be a good pair to trade up to the prior high. That is 1.6120. It's not only the prior high based on that price action there at the top, but it will also meet that top of the channel within the next couple of months. So this might be a nice little long-term trade. As it continues following the channel, I will likely make some sort of decision on this one as the week evolves. It might not be this week, it might be next week, but this one is one that's on my radar and will probably continue to be on my radar for a while. Pound JPY. JPY was also weakening against the pound significantly, which matched my bias, as I'm more a believer of pound strength than anything else. It is in a sideways channel, and it has now bounced off the top. So we have that retrace caused, of course, by the fundamental out of the UK last week. That caused it to weaken against the JPY, or the JPY got stronger, whichever you prefer. It is now back within the channel. It might be looking for a trip all the way back to the bottom. I'll wait for a good entry either way. I'm happy to trade this one in either direction, but I'm going to be very cautious about it. When this pair moves, it tends to move hundreds of pips at a time. You don't want to be caught in the wrong direction on one of these. Moving on to AUDJPY, and this is another trade. Again, in all the Aussie pairs, I expect the Aussie to regain strength. It did do so for the better part of 3, almost actually 4 weeks. It has been going up. It's now taking a breather, so the JPY regains some of the strength. This is the normal waviness of the market. I would expect it to just continue heading on its way up eventually. I am in a long-term trade. I will not be closing that trade. My stop is way below the bottom of this chart. So again, I'm willing to hold on to that one for months at a time until it goes back to the high 80s, which is my ultimate target. However, I will trade it in the longer term in either direction. So if I see a good entry for that, I certainly won't ignore it. Euro New Zealand, this is a pair that I've been pretty much ignoring. I've taken profit here and there. You can see where I've shorted, got in and out, and traded it up as well, also at profit. It tends to not make these nice little bounces, but all in all, it's been very sideways since about October of last year. For short-term trading, that's not a bad thing. You can always catch these bounces for about 200 to 300 pips at a time is the distance between where it is right now and the next level of support there at the bottom. So we'll look for entries on this one as we have been doing, but I don't see the opportunity for a longer term trade so long as it continues to move sideways. So a mixed pair. We'll likely be trading it this week for short-term gains. We'll see what signals it provides. Pound Canadian, as with the pound, I expect pound strength, and that is what played out for the longest time. Since August of last year, the pound Canadian has been going up. It finally faltered around the middle of last month when the CAD started to do a recovery against pretty much every other currency. And right now it is at one of those prior levels of support. I would still expect this one to go back to the top. So continue to follow this trend line here. And for the week to come, I'm going to be looking for it to regain, to cross back above these trend lines. And that will likely be my entry to try and capture. There's about 500 pips at least once it does that, that break and heads back towards the top. I'm sorry, I'm getting fumble-mouthed here. So that will be a nice little long-term trade once it establishes itself. But on the shorter-term trades, I will be trading this one most likely towards the top. In fact, one of my open trades from last week is a long on the GBPCAD. So I'm already in this trade, short-term, trading it higher. Curiously enough, it was an open trade from the prior week as well that I did exit at profit. So if you take a look at this little uptick here, that was pretty much the trade from last week. I exited that one at profit, and then I re-entered once it bounced off support. I re-entered towards the top. So this will be the second week running that we have different pound Canadian trades open over the weekend, both of them long, and all fingers crossed and all that. This one will continue heading towards the top and take us out at some level of profit. And that does cover all the charts that we're going to be looking at for the week. I'm going to take a slight breather Drink a little bit of water and that. My mouth is getting a little bit dry. Does anybody have any questions in the meantime over anything in the charts itself? Any questions, clarifications? Hit me with them as I take a 30-second reprieve here. I'm listening.
Hello?
Hey, Jeffrey, I didn't even know you were on the call, brother. How are you?
I'm good, yeah. And so, which pair were you saying if it goes up, if it on Thursday or whenever?
If we're talking Thursday, it will likely be one of the JPY pairs because the Bank of Japan has an interest rate decision on our Thursday night, their Friday morning. So it was likely one of the JPY pairs. I'd have to, at this point, I can't remember exactly which one I was referring to, but likely it would have been the USDJPY or the EUROJPY.
Okay, thank you.
Either way, I'll have the recording of this so you can scroll back and take a look when I said that. But the JPY, be very careful on any open JPY trades on Thursday night when that announcement comes out. If there is some sort of upset announcement, it could be devastating for anything you have open with the JPY. Or, of course, it could be like winning the Powerball. It depends which direction you were trading it. And no way to know until after the fact. Okay, on that note, I'm going to continue. So what we're seeing here is my little cheat sheet on what I saw while doing my analysis on the charts. So I do cheat. When I call it a cheat sheet, I'm being very literal. I do cheat in that while I'm preparing this deck, of course, I am doing my analysis. So I already pretty much know what I'm going to tell you guys. That just makes it a much shorter meeting. At some point, if anybody's interested, I might do a completely blind analysis in which I just go in and start looking. But that usually takes me a couple of hours, and I don't want to bore you guys with all that on a weekly basis. So what I do is I look at all these charts, I make my my analysis, my evaluation, and then I jot some notes on this slide. And of course, I forget to update the date. This should say week of April 22nd. Apologies for that. And of significance this week is, as mentioned, the Canadian dollar did suffer that upset based on the interest rate decision, and that will likely continue to develop for the week. So we're going to be keeping a close eye on the Canadian pairs for any opportunities. The Aussie pairs, as mentioned, gave back some of their recent gains. Not all of them, just some. It made a zag after the zig, which again is the expectation in the markets. And I would expect continued recovery of the Aussie dollar long term. The euro pairs, the euro had a sort of a recovery week, which I misspelled there. Again, my apologies. I'm doing these too fast and not paying attention. Had a recovery week, moving back into strength mode. Especially against the pound. I don't think that can last, hence my question there at the end. So I would be looking at the euro pound to trade it again towards the bottom of the chart, but I'm also going to be looking at all the euro pairs for any opportunities. Moving on, the pound pairs, of course, the pound was the big loser of the week. It gave up significant ground after an unexpected CPI number, where now I'm still bullish on the pound in general. So I would expect it to recover from that upset, but that may not happen this week. It will happen at some point when we'll just have to be ready and be looking at the signals. For the USD pairs, obviously, the USD is always going to be on this slide. Why? Because of the volume. The volume of trade in US dollar, it is the world reserve currency. So the volume of trade outpaces every other currency. It's always going to make it onto my radar. But we should be cautious about the USD. It remains uncharacteristically strong in general, and I, along with everybody else, expect the dollar to weaken at some point later in the year. My opinion, it should have already happened, and the fact that it hasn't happened yet should be worrying people. But I will trade it in either direction. I'm just going to be very careful on any USD pairs, not to overextend myself, and always to have an exit strategy for whatever I'm doing. So that's my my cheat sheet for the week here. And then my final words here, and this is very relevant as to last week. We should always be mindful of shifts in patterns in markets. Something's going up, at some point it's going to stop going up and go into reversal. Some of these are inconsequential, of course. Who cares if a currency retraces a week or two if it maintains its overall trend? That said, if you're a short-term trader, that can break you. So you have to be aware of what time frame you're trading and the patterns that the markets are making as you do so. Last week, I was long on several pound pairs, and the announcement took me by surprise. It did shave a lot of profit off of my week. And in fact, the only reason I recovered the week was because of the Canadian fundamental announcement, which I managed to trade very successfully and made up for my losses. All in all, the week was a loser. I ended up down by 1.2%. After the loss from the pound trades, that's quite impressive. The recovery, thanks to the fundamental, was enormous, and allowed me to end the week flat. So always be mindful of those shifts. I do prefer a flat week to a losing week. So pulling that one out of the fire was a feather in my cap, and I really did celebrate myself for it. Figuratively and literally, I cracked a bottle of scotch on the weekend and said I deserve this sucker. So for long-term traders, though, unless it's a complete reversal and a new long-term trend is being established, you can ignore the smaller wins and really only pay attention to the hurricane, because that's what's going to make or break you as a long-term trader. It's ignoring a long-term shift. If you miss those as a long-term trader, that's when you're going to be dead in the water. And that is the end for me for today. Opening it up again for any Q&A from anyone out there. So if you have any questions related to what I said or related to anything at all regarding Forex trading or psychology of trading, because we have Callum on the line as well, by all means, hit me with it. Tough crowd, tough crowd. Jeffrey, you back in town, or is that tomorrow?
Yeah, I got in a few hours ago from Dallas, but I got to go to San Antonio tomorrow, but only for one day, and then I'll be back the rest of the week.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, that's right. All righty. So reach out to me, not related to the Forex trading room, but I want to get you back on track with the other exercise.
Okay.
So reach out when you're back and you have time, and
I
we'll
will.
do some trading, you and I together.
Okay.
All righty. Anybody else have anything? Okay, then thank you very much. I did post the end of the week video from Friday. I had posted it already, but I had forgotten to send the email out. So if you'd been paying attention to our YouTube channel, you would have already seen it, but I did include the link in the email that went out today.
Okay.
And I will talk to you guys tomorrow at noon for our next session. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.